does. And, you can still use the invis pots against stuff like the Pride spawning, but it does mean that there's a lot more to juggle with the rest of the path. But Mist is a dungeon that we've seen a lot of different evolutions in the pathing and the strategies in this dungeon over just the last few weeks in the MDI. I mean, there's been an incredible amount of diversity in a dungeon that to me was somewhat surprising, because this is a dungeon that you think about on the live servers as a fairly straight line. There's actually so much different stuff that you can do with this when you kind of get down to that really intense level of min-maxing.
Absolutely, and this is, of course, going to be the area for it right now, as Piami and Golden Guardians are facing off, one with the Holy Pally, one with the Discipline Priest. Let's see how it goes in Mr. Tirna Scithe.
All right, so I really like to see this by Piami. So they actually did adapt their lineup. They actually included their Holy Priest instead of the disc and just brought the Shadow Priest. It makes sense. Kuri is known as a Shadow Priest player, so it totally makes sense for them to switch to this lineup. And having the Shadow Priest means you still have that PI buff for the mage once in a while, and you have that Ashen Hollow, that the huge damage from the Holy Paladin coming out every 4 minutes. Now, the one thing that they don't have now is a full Shadow Melt setup, because Paladins cannot be Night Elves. You can see Igloo is playing a Dwarf. So that means if anything goes wrong with bolstering, they cannot Shadow Melt off that huge bolstered mob. So they need to play the bolstering perfectly, because there's no way out if they make a mistake.
Yeah, they're going to have to re-plan a little bit how they path through the dungeon. Things are going to be a little bit less forgiving for them. But the benefit of that is they have this massive damage of that Holy Paladin, whereas, and they still get that power infusion, like you were saying. The Shadow Priest, it's a Night Fae Shadow Priest as well, which means that you get the access to the Fae Guardians as well. So in addition to power infusion, you have those helpful fairies that can even further pump up your Fire Mage damage. Not something you'll see on a pack like this, right? Because Dr. J kind of sitting there, and actually here comes the combustion right now, and starts just blasting those damage meters. Meanwhile, Golden Guardian's using a much more standard composition, I would say, for this dungeon. There's been evolution among their plans here as well. We've seen teams go to and then away from the Moonkin at different times. Golden Guardians opting not to play that Moonkin. You see it on the side of Piami. But the rest of their composition, a lot of stuff that we've seen a lot of so far this tournament. Piami, though, up a little bit, I'd say, ahead as we're early on here. 21% count already, and they've spawned their Pride, whereas Golden Guardians just about to get to that threshold. But I think Piami have opened up a little bit of an early lead here.
Yeah, definitely. And it also looks like they're not trying to do any of these kind of priest mind control shenanigans we've seen the teams do before. We saw them, I think Golden Guardians is doing it. As you can see, one of those Soul Cleaver at his seat in the corner there at the very end. You can see it on Golden Guardian's side. And they're just going to be mind controlling it later on with JB and then helping them out with the damage on the boss. But Piami, having the setup that they have, they don't actually probably need that mind control, because they have the Moonkin with the huge single target burst with that Celestial Alignment and that Convoke coming in, as well as the Shadow Priest with the PI and the Ashen Hollow from the Paladin. So with their setup, they don't actually need to do that mind control. They can just completely burst the boss without that. And we will see how much damage they have on Ingra once Roman is reaching 20%. There we go. Let's see how much damage they can do.
Yeah, and look at this damage meter here. We've got the healer on top. Look at the damage able to put out there.
Wow.
Now the Moonkin with the Convoke is going to ascend just ahead there. The Moon lands, and they are in great shape. And yeah, like you were saying, Golden Guardians here are going to be able to make use of that Dominant mind control, because they have that Discipline Priest. Piami didn't have access to that, but you can see the rest of their composition changes are really well optimized for exactly that burst moment. And as long as they can get through the rest of this dungeon without the need for that Shadow Meld, which I think they probably can, then perhaps there will be even more places that they can leverage that incredible damage of the Ashen Hallow and the Wings and the Combustion and the Power Infusion and all of those, and the Convoked Spirits, right? The burst, particularly the burst single target that Piami is able to put out, is going to be completely absurd, and that's going to melt these later bosses as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to have to keep an eye on that damage from the Holy Paladin and also the Moonkin. So we'll see as they do later on. We see Golden Guardians also manage to one-face the boss. They also did, as I said, use this mind control strategy with the Soul Cleaver that they're now finishing off. You can see the mind control is broken. They're now finishing it off. It is a little bit slower because it's bolstering, right? So they have to finish it off before they pull the next trash pack. Otherwise, they're going to be bolstering it. So definitely losing a little bit of time here and there. And you see how fast PIME is, right? They're already in that second area of the maze. Now, the maze is actually fixed for the MDI to make sure there's no RNG and everything is fair with the competitiveness of the tournament. So that's why the maze is actually fixed for these players, and they know which trash mobs they're going to be getting.
Yeah, that means that there is a little bit more precision, perhaps, that they're able to have, right? They know exactly, not just like kind of a rough estimate of how long the maze is going to be, but they can plan out individual cooldowns throughout the entire place, which is something that we're going to see PIME put to good use here. And I think another thing to mention about PIME is that they really have this kind of odd number that they're working with. Well, I guess an even number technically. That 4-minute cooldown of the Ashen Hallow, not something that you see on a lot of the other timings of a lot of the other classes, but really does mean that if they can get from first boss to second boss at right around that 4-minute range, they're going to be having some tremendous efficiency in terms of Igloo just deploying all that damage at all the right times.
Yeah, and it looks like they also managed to spawn that Pride perfectly. So they basically finished off the trash pack previously at the same time to be able to get out of combat before the Pride puts them in combat again. Because you can only trigger the door of the maze when you're out of combat. So that's what they were doing. They finished off the trash, make sure they triggered the next maze area, and then they got in combat with the Pride, and they pulled the Pride on top of the next trash pack. So this is incredibly efficient, making sure you don't have to single target down the Pride, but you're just pulling the trash on top. So very well done by them. Also also really good for bolstering, to be honest, not just for the Pride skip, but also for bolstering. And it looks like they pulled some trash from another maze on top of this mini boss here. So well done. They found a way to get some extra trash here from the side area, and they pulled it on top of the single mob here of the mini boss at the end as well. So it is bolstering, right? But they somehow pulled it later on to make sure that the mini boss is not getting bolstered.
Yeah, this is really, really clever and a really great use of that. We've seen various different ways that teams have found to actually tag those mobs from other rooms. And you can see now, okay, so now they're going to run through the wall here right as that Pride is spawning. And I think we may have seen Invis pots coming out as well. No. It looks like the Pride is coming in. Okay, so they are going to be doing the Pride with the trash pull. This is a little bit sketchy, a little bit scary. You can see the bubble is coming out actually from Igloo to make sure that he's going to be able to heal. But that's a big commitment. One of the most powerful effects that Paladin have, of course, is that immunity. But they're going to be able to use that to get in there, do some big damage. You can see Igloo pumping out the Ashen Hallow deeps on this pack, is going to be beating every single player in the group in damage except for Dr. J's Combustion. And that is really incredible work there. They're going to be making their way onto this second boss. So it's not going to be Paladin Burst used here. The Paladin Burst, rather than using it on the boss, was used on the Pride plus Trash 5-target combo. And that is also a really good place for Ashen Hallow. Ashen Hallow does insane damage on that size ball.
Yeah, just really well done by PIME. Just the whole maze area just been played really well by them. You also see the Hibernate actually coming out of clicks here. Wow, not even having the healer using anything, just the poor Moonkin having to use that, having to use the CC to not get hit by the Vulpin. Well done, as they're now rocking that first guessing game. I do wonder if we're going to see a team just try to skip that last guessing game. We'll see. They definitely have the tools available with the Moonkin's Convoke, theoretically. Convoke is an ability that actually is not very good on huge AoE pulls. The less targets there are, the better Convoke is actually going to be. So definitely something you can commit to the Mistcaller here if you want to be pushing it, but maybe without any of those touch of deaths, without a Windwalker, probably going to be a little bit hard to be able to do it. But on the other hand, Golden Guardians, they just now managed to reach Mistcaller, so quite a big difference here in the timer. So PIME definitely shaping up their strategy between time trials and now.
Igloo hopping on that Divine Steed, has to kite all the way around in a big old circle though, because being chased by that illusory fox thing. They are going to be able to kill that right guessing game mob, and yeah, as you said, 10% will be when the next one starts the cast. I think that we will not be seeing many teams attempt to avoid,
Probably not.
like to kill the boss through the cast before it finishes. The Convoke is not a serious resource to commit because, as you said, it's not going to be good until the next single target moment, which isn't until the very end of the dungeon. But everything else they would have to do to make it happen. Oh, okay, no, here we go. There's a Convoke coming out. Let's see if they can make it happen. 3%. I think they were going for it, but not quite able to make it happen. But I think that's a pretty serious proof of concept there, because I think if they had maybe had a slightly better lineup of which spells were being cast when, I think that's possible.
He even committed Celestial Alignment too.
Yeah. I stand entirely corrected. They're able to eventually, get through this boss as well. But if that had worked out, that would have saved him another 20 seconds. That being said, even without that working, they're still in the lead here, as Mistcaller is at 37% for Golden Guardians and has already died for Piami. Here's Golden Guardians working on that last little bit of the boss's health. So they are something in the order of a minute behind Piami at this point, as we can see fired up. On that mage here, we got JB on the cam on his Disciplined Priest. Piami making their way.
You mean the PI bot, yeah?
Yeah, the PI, J.PI bot, who's had the joy of creating 4 different priests for each covenant and a different power infusion related name on each of them, I'm sure.
Interesting to see that JB is actually playing Kyrian here as well, instead of the Night Fae version that we've seen a lot of priests play because of those Fae Guardians to basically reduce a person's major cooldown, so combustion for the Fire Mage. That is something we've seen priests do before, but it's very possible that they maybe figured, you know what, the cooldown reduction we get on the combustion here in this dungeon is not actually something we need. The timings work out anyway, even without the reduction, and therefore we do play Night Fae. So interesting choice, as we also see Piami now proccing that 80% pride. So pretty big advantage for Piami here. It really looks like this setup change with the Holy Paladin and the Shadow Priest is really working out.
I mean, it's just so much damage that they're able to get here. And the drawbacks of the Piami composition, right, is that you don't get access to the Shadow Meld ways to maneuver through the dungeon. But if you can mitigate that, right, if you can come up with a path where that doesn't cost you anything, you get so much damage as a result. But we're going to see Golden Guardians here try and claw their way back in here with a very large pull, very scary pull, especially with those bees, those Spine Mob Reavers involved in this pull as well. Those mobs are particularly dangerous. A lot of stuff that needs to be interrupted here and managed. So you can see they're doing a really good job of slowly moving around. Yoda under a lot of pressure as the Bullstring Sacks stack up on everything, but they're able to get through it here. They've caught up in count now to where Piami is, but they are a pride behind, right? Because they are just starting on this pride, whereas Piami have already killed it and are nearly done with their next trash bowl. So this is going to be tough here for Golden Guardians. I think they're going to need something potentially to go wrong on the side of Piami, who are making their way right now to the final boss of the dungeon. They are getting that pull started at 96% trash count. So they'll need to find a little bit more count after the boss, but they have all of their damage that they might ever want here as the Ashen Hallow comes out with the Pride buff into the last boss. Bloodlust will be available in 9 seconds, and they're going to make short work of this boss from there.
Yeah, the Celestial Alignment and the Convoke just came back up. Of course, Clix had used that combination of cooldowns for the previous boss to try or attempt to push it before the last guessing game. Didn't manage to get it done, but now the cooldowns are back up and the Bloodlust is also being popped, of course, by Dr. J, making sure that they have a huge amount of single target here. And at the very end, we're probably going to see them pull the trash on top, that they still need to proc that 100% pride. They don't want to deal with that one. They're just completely skipping it, proccing it at the very, very end. Golden Guardian slowly but surely getting to that point as well, but it's just going to be too little too late because Piami is just melting this boss.
Piami has a 4th DPS player. The Igloo's doing second damage, and
look at Igloo's damage.
Like it's just the burst or anything. The boss is almost dead, and Igloo's still in second place on the damage meter here. I mean, it's completely absurd what he's able to make happen here, and what Piami are able to do with this. And I mean, this just looks so incredibly powerful. They're saving so much time as a result of having all of this extra damage to deploy.
Yeah, definitely. And if we compare this to their time trial times, Piami's time was 15 minutes 15. And now they're finishing off this boss very soon, having a time that's less than 14 minutes. So saving so much time by switching that setup here. Really shout out to Reload Fulcrum to completely come up with this setup here, and having so many teams really adapt to this. Just insane amounts of damage coming out of this setup as they're about to finish off Tradova here and winning that first dungeon against Golden Guardians. And wow, I mean, how fast. Well done, Piami.
Absolutely. PI me, adapting other teams' strategies. They're finishing off the last bit of trash percentage, and there it is with the 14-10 Mists of Tirna Scithe run onto that one. So very, very well played. That's actually faster than the Perplexed time trial that they had. Wow. I believe we saw, as you mentioned there, Nagura, Reload Fulcrum had the absolute, one of the best runs as well throughout the tournament, and they had a 1440, so extremely well played there by Piami Settles as they take that game number 1 victory.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in the Holy Paladin and Mists now. That seems really, really good. The Moon can also seem okay. The Shadow Priest brought a lot of invisible utility whenever he was playing that, whenever he was on that Night Fae, and using those Guardians to actually reduce the cooldown on combustion more often than not seemed pretty silly. Dr. J got combust up in like 45 seconds on Mist Caller and stuff like that, and you're like, he's running PI Legendary, he's running Night Fae, he's really committing to the support priest narrative that we got going on for live Shadow. So, I mean, it seemed pretty good. I feel like the priest is probably the most flexible, but granted, like, if combustion is up kind of deal, and that's going to be a bigger damage gain than potentially anything else across the whole entire run. So it's a lot of invisible DPS, it seems like.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's start talking about it. What clips do you have for us? We got that huge damage on Inga Malik as well.
Yeah. So we got a lot of interesting decisions and a lot of interesting strategies that are able to be deployed due to the compositional changes. Obviously, this one it was pretty standard. Like we've seen groups kill Inga Malik super fast. Not with their Holy Paladin, not with their healer doing 35k DPS normally. Ashen Hollow is silly to facilitate that kind of damage with their Hammer Wrath, but it's just how it is with Venthyr Covenant. And then you actually do see the group PI pulling the mobs even through the mist on top of this mini-boss, making sure that they're still doing more traditional pulls, and so they're not sacrificing, like, while they're able to do what I would describe as like gimmicky stuff, they're still not sacrificing any damage. And then you have, obviously, them trying to beat this Mist Caller guessing game and getting the boss down to 3%. Basically, if they're able to beat that, that would have saved them another 25 or 30 seconds on top of the timer that they already had. So there are a lot of things that I would describe as like pseudo-gimmicky that they're able to pull off just due to the insane amount of power that the Holy Paladin Ashen Hollow brings, due to the fact that the Boomkin Convoke also brings, and on top of that, the Shadow reducing the Mage's combustion, allowing him to get 3 combusts on Mistcaller. Kind of silly, I will say, but it's just how it is.
Just think about
Also,
it, Settles, okay? In 905, it's getting buffed, so it's going to give even more cooldown reduction than before, all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Nagura.
I just wanted to say that I just saw in the replay that when Clix was using his Convoke on Mistcaller, the Vulpin actually spawned, and half the Convoke damage actually went into the Ed. So maybe if that wouldn't have happened, they actually had enough damage. But yeah, a little bit unlucky, I guess.
Are you getting some flashbacks to the Sun King Salvation when your full moon just goes into one of the phoenixes or something?
Yeah.
That is not what you hope to see.
and then the shield doesn't break. All right, PI me with the game number 1 victory. It's also going to be moving us on into Plaguefall as well. So we're going to be looking at Tyrannical, Sanguine, and Quaking coming up onto this one, Dratnos. And really, we've been looking at how well these teams have been managing Plague Borers. But what do you think is going to be affecting some of them as we got Sanguine and Quaking coming up here?
I mean, yeah, Sanguine is really an extra hard mode on top of all of those parts of the dungeon, because you're having all of these areas where you're trying to have mobs die on top of each other so that they're exploding onto each other. But if you have Sanguine puddles in the area then as a result of that, and you heal a mob back up, especially if that was a mob that was supposed to die to environmental damage, then all of a sudden you're dealing with way more damage and way more health than you were expecting in that area. So a lot of this is going to be on tank movement, tank positioning, on the rest of the group providing the support that's needed there. And you got to be careful with the Quaking affix as well, right? You can't can't be too close if you're tightly packed in, especially if you're trying to avoid pulling extra stuff, and so you can't back in a certain direction because you'll pull a mob that's in that side, and you're trying to get in close to help manage the mobs. That affix starts to throw another wrench into things as well. So this is a technical dungeon with affixes that will further enhance just how much technical play is needed to make this a good, clean run.
Most definitely, and we've already been able to see, and talk about the tyrannical changes as well. We've had a couple weeks to sort of experience them as well, Titles, and pretty much being able to obliterate Inga Malik in that last dungeon. How do you think the tyrannical has really been squaring up for MDI and for live servers so far?
I mean, it definitely was warranted, just with how large the discrepancy is between Fortified and Tyrannical with how much time you actually do end up gaining on the bosses. I do think that Plaguefall typically has some of the harder bosses. The third boss, Domina Venomblade, and Margrave, the final boss of the instance, are both not really slouches. On top of that, we've seen an interesting strategy for MDI where groups are like tanking the boss on the island, and like you have to beat the second Call Slimes ability. And we've seen some groups be really close and potentially not able to do that. But yeah. I do think with the tyrannical nerfs that on Globgrog, being able to beat the second Beck and Slime should be a little bit easier at least.
Most definitely. We've also been seeing some of the teams just completely ignoring some of the volatile slimes exploding on the second boss as well. Just dropping barrier, pain suppression, everything like that, and just dealing with it.
Something I actually just thought of. Last time we saw Golden Guardians in Plaguefall, they were doing this weird thing where they were keeping that Wonder Grow mushroom with them for the whole entire dungeon. I think the last time we saw this dungeon, it was on bolstering though. So I wonder if that's going to be a strategy. Well, it is bolstering again. So I wonder if that's going to be a strategy that they're going to implement once more, or if they're going to abandon the Fungal Mancer carrying it around, spell stealing the Wonder Grow.
I mean, they can always keep it CC'd and it'll still cast the Wonder Grow like onto itself pretty consistently, so they can kind of keep it out of bolstering range fairly easily, as long as they're able to shadow meld.
It's Sanguine Quaking.
So,
yeah.
So as long as they're just able to keep it away the entire time, but it's also like the movement as well. If you're just dragging that thing along with you pretty much the entire period as well. But if you look at like, we're talking about routing as well, Dratnos. I mean, between the first and second bosses, Plague Borers kind of just eat up everything. So how long would you think you'd really just want to be dragging that around, especially with how slow it moves?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily help to get like a damage buff when you're in an area where the damage is coming from the environment anyways, right? Where it's all about managing the mobs. But on the other hand, if you can keep bringing that thing with you the entire dungeon, and Fired Up is just going to have a damage buff for all the parts later in the dungeon as well, I mean, that's starting to sound really, really, really compelling. It further increases the difficulty of the dungeon. There's way more ways that things can go wrong if you're carrying that thing around with you, if you're having to use CC abilities on it and then you don't have those available, if there's a panic situation of whatever kind in whatever pull you're doing, you can't use it to make those pulls easier. But it should theoretically reduce the timer of the dungeon if they decide to try and make that strategy happen again. Last time we saw them go for it, it ended up biting them, though. So there's a good chance as well that they've rethought their strategy, and it's the kind of thing that is very likely to get cut if you're like, okay, look, we can make this happen 40% of the time. Maybe you decide to do that, maybe you don't. It depends on how you're feeling about the dungeon overall relative to the other teams. And the calculus is incredibly difficult for those sort of decisions.
Most definitely. And just making things harder and more complicated doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be overall better for the team. So let's see what they got in store as the Golden Guardians is down 1 right now versus PI Me as we enter into Plaguefall.
All right, neither of those teams actually do want to get into that lower bracket, so let's see what they can show us here in Plaguefall. Looks like both of the tanks are picking up those 2 neutral mobs there on the side, because they actually do give you trash percentage, so it's a little bit extra free percentage they gain because they don't have a lot of HP, so they can just cleave them down with that first huge pull that we see both Piami and Golden Guardians gather up there. The big giant with 2 or even 3 packs, it looks like, on top of each other there. We do see the grip coming in by Rentari and Yoda, and now they're just nuking everything down. None of the affixes is actually preventing them to do anything here, except Sanguine is something they have to be careful about, right? They want to make sure they use the Ring of Peace properly to not have any of those heals go off from those Sanguine pools.
Yeah, very nice to have access to that Death Knight as well. As mobs start to die, you can just grip a mob that might be about to heal out of it, and that's going to be something that we're going to be looking for both Death Knights on both teams to be able to do, because that'll save a tremendous amount of time if you're able to prevent some healing. As you can see, PI they are, wow, those are some large mushrooms.
Do they have bolstering?
It kind of looks like it, yeah. Maybe
yeah.
Those certainly look like they're bolstering. So we might have the wrong affixes between the two teams, or maybe we just are wrong about which affixes were active in this dungeon, because, I mean, those are some very, very large fungal monsters for sure. I don't think they get that large just from their own Wonder Grow ability, but maybe actually.
I mean, possible.
I thought I saw the bolstering animation play off though, but maybe I could be. I know. No. Look, they're sanguine. So it's not bolstering. So I'm mistaken.
Oh, yeah, it's not bolstering at all. So
yeah, it was
actually
all
does
just
have the same
Wonder
animation. Yeah, it's Wonder Growth. Okay, so it looks like bolstering, but it's just the same animation, I guess. Never mind us. So it is sanguine and quaking after all. They just had all of these Wonder Growths go off. You see an incap as well on Piami's side here in the corner. Looks like they really do want to play a strategy. And you can see on Golden Guardian's side, I mean, look, I'm fired up. Look how big his character model is right now. He's got all of those buffs spell stolen on him, and you can see the Fungal Mancer just being incapped there on the left side of the screen for Golden Guardians. So both of the teams trying to use this strategy, as we've talked about with the Fungal Mancers.
Yeah, so for those who don't know exactly how this thing works, the Fungal Mancers cast this Wonder Grow on themselves, and it also buffs all the other nearby enemies as well. And it gives them a stack of this massive haste buff. But you can spell steal it, and it'll stack up on yourself as well. So you can spell steal, and managing your mana effectively, you can roll a very high amount of stacks of it for quite a long time before you're out of mana. And that's something that we're seeing mages on both sides here, really trying to optimize for as much uptime as possible. One even further perk of it is that even if the Fungal Mancer is imprisoned, is paralyzed, any of that kind of stuff, it will still cast the Wonder Grow. So you can continue to spell steal it even while it's safely, CC'd off to the side. You don't need something like Entangling Roots, which is normally something that you need for those sort of strategies where you want a mob to be casting and not in the pack. Just any CC will do. It still casts while CC'd, and you can see Golden Guardians have really used this to their advantage. They've destroyed that first boss. They are now moving on to the second area with that Fungal Mancer, walking along with them. They're going to want to CC it. And yeah, there's the Paralyze coming out just in a pretty well-planned spot, I would say, as they're now getting another big pull going while fired up, casting those Flame Strikes. I would not want to be in the other end of those Flame Strikes.
All right, so I fired up, just doing a huge amount of damage with that buff that he's been spell stealing, and that was a really huge pull. They also pulled the Spine Breaker here from the left side over onto this. They also had the Plague Borers explode. Now the Plague Borers actually have a target cap. When they explode, they debuff themselves plus 4 more random mobs. So when they do those huge pulls, it's not actually going to go on everyone, but there's nothing like bolstering, so they don't have to care about that. They're just going to do as much damage as they can with the Plague Borers, and the rest of the damage is just coming out of I'm fired up, dealing with the rest of the AoE that needs to be done, as they're dealing with this 47% pride. PI looking to do the exact same thing as Golden Guardians, just quite a lot slower. This first pull difference was quite huge. I mean, Golden Guardians just had this first pull done so much quicker compared to PI.
Yeah, the mana as well is something to watch out for as well. Making sure that they're able to keep those spell steals sustained, right? And not drop those stacks, because it is a very powerful buff. As fired up actually under quite a bit of attack here, taking some damage here. I think even has some threat. It's going to be hard to avoid having threat when you're pumping out just this much damage. But, I mean, Fired Up has killed that mob before it killed him. He is going to fall back down to Earth now as those stacks drop off of him, but he might be able to start building them back up again soon. Or maybe they've decided to actually kill off that mob as part of that pull. I didn't quite see. Golden Guardians walking their way up now through this gauntlet. PI, I would say about a pull, maybe a pull and a half behind where Golden Guardians are. This run is looking really, really, really good for Golden Guardians. You can see they are going to be fighting 2 of these tentacles at the exact same time. They have Lip off-tanking one as that Unholy Death Knight, and that's going to allow them to just keep moving up and avoid having this place take too long. They've spawned a Pride, and they're going to be able to kill this Pride and this mini-boss with the Plague Borers exploding. Because Plague Borers exploding does tremendous damage to Prides. You can watch this here. That Pride is just going to be melting as a result of that dot on it. They don't have to put any of their own damage into this Pride, it's going to be handled entirely by the Plague Borers. They have another set of 2 new Plague Borers now. Now the question is whether they're going to be able to take these down and use them to kill another pack. And you can see the movement abilities come out instantly. They are really wanting to make sure that they can get as much of the Plague Borers to land on these extra mobs as possible. And you can see they're going to use it on the purple slime. And that's an annoying purple slime, right? The purple slime makes it so you can't do as much damage to all the other stuff. And you either have to kill it by itself after or kill it by itself before. By rushing down there, they've been able to just remove it from existence, right? With those Plague Borers. And now they can do all of the other mobs in this second boss area all at once without having to worry about that purple slime. And are they going to pull the boss as well? Is the boss in here? Oh my goodness. No, I don't.
Maybe not.
I don't see him. No, and I think that would be a
man.
little.
I was hoping for the boss, but with Sanguine, it might be a little bit ambitious, as you might have a hard time controlling some of these mobs, especially the Spinebreaker doesn't really move.
There he
But
is.
now the boss is being pulled, so at the end of this trash bug, they are pulling Dr. Icarus on top. Curry actually going down for Piami here. They're actually having some issues. Looks like they managed to get them back up though, because they did. Looks like Shadow Melt off some of the aggro here, but the Pride, they're still in combat with it. Looks like they tried to skip it, but didn't manage so. And now Kuri did manage to get Rest back up. So small mistake by Piami. But yeah, Golden Guardians so far ahead at this point, as they're already fighting Dr. Icarus, just pushing that second phase here. Let's see how they deal with the bombs, with the slime bombs. If they choose to ignore them, or if they actually are putting any sort of damage into it.
Yeah, fired up, just fiending for the haste buffs wherever he could find it there. He's standing in that puddle left behind when the red slimes die. It does some damage over time to you, but it also gives you a haste buff, so he was able to make use of that to get a little bit more damage out on that first platform and a little bit more cooldown recovery on the combustion, which he's deploying now. And they are just going to be cleaving down this bomb. A lot of teams have decided to let the bomb explode with barrier and other cooldowns, but Golden Guardians use that barrier instead to make that massive trash pull work, and they've instead said, you know what, we'll just kill this bomb through the use of our incredible cleave damage that we have, right? We have all of this extra damage that just does huge AoE incidentally, right? We've got these Elysian Decrees, we've got all these effects that are just going to get good value if we decide to just kill the bomb and we fight Dr. Icarus on top of it. And by doing this, we then get to move that barrier off of the bomb, and we'll see now if they try and commit to the boss and kill it prior to this bomb exploding, or if they're going to use a similar strategy on this third bomb. This one, I think, is one where if they have the damage, they might be able to just ignore the Plague Bomb, and that looks like exactly what they are doing. There's the Sigil of Misery from Yoda. That's going to keep the purple slime out of the way here. Ooh, Dr. Ick is getting a little bit close to it, but it is going to avoid breaking. They really need to make sure that this dies before that bomb explodes, because otherwise they are going to be in a lot of trouble, though.
Yeah, the cooldowns are gone at this point. The combustion already came out, so they definitely want to make sure they have enough damage to finish this off. But they have a Touch of Death available by Shakib, and they are managing to do so, as they still are on 0 deaths, 75% trash, and done with that second boss. So really well done by Golden Guardians, as they are recovering their play compared to that first dungeon. I mean, to be honest, in the first dungeon, Golden Guardians didn't really make any mistakes, right? They just had the slower strategy because they did not adapt their setup to this newly found Holy Paladin Shadow Priest composition. Outside of that, Golden Guardians played really well. And it looks like they're also playing well in this dungeon here, but this time they don't have any sort of disadvantages with their strategy. It really looks like they are doing an incredibly good job, as they're now seeing this ambusher here to start with an Imprison, gathering up everything else. Maybe the ambusher is something they're going to deal with later on, or maybe they just completely skip it. That's also possible.
Yeah, I mean, 0 deaths Plaguefall is already a very impressive thing that most teams aren't able to accomplish with any degree of reliability. The fact that Golden Guardians are making this happen with the added difficulty of their strategy at the start of this dungeon, with the added difficulty of just basically never dropping combat for the first 5 or 6 minutes of the dungeon. I mean, this is a really, really impressive performance coming out from Golden Guardians. If they can keep this up, we still have 2 really tough bosses ahead of them, but they have opened up a huge lead over PIME, who are still working on that last platform of Dr. Icarus. Something like 2.5 minutes maybe at this point separate these 2 teams as Golden Guardians working on that 80% pride, and then they've really just got a boss trash boss done sequence ahead of them. Of course, though, tyrannical last 2 bosses of Plaguefall, not something that you can just count out ever.
Yeah, it still will be dangerous, as they're now finishing off this Pride. You can see everyone dropping a little bit low, as no one wants to commit those offensive cooldowns, but they should be fine as the bubble comes out by Lip as well. And I mean, yeah, just really clean play. But then one more thing to mention is that they're actually not playing any Necrolords. You see, JB is playing Night Fae to get those Fae Guardians to reduce the combustion cooldown for I'm Fired Up. And no one else actually playing that Necrolord Covenant, so they cannot use the Fleshcraft to get the haste buff from the blood slimes. But doesn't look like they even need it. I'm Fired Up, unfortunately, getting stunned here by someone else's AoE stun, unfortunately. So a little bit of a mistake, but they should be able to be fine anyway. And yeah, looks like Necrolord is just really a covenant that is not that needed in Plaguefall. Those teams just seem like they don't need or want this extra haste buff.
Yeah, I mean, you have to go a little bit out of your way to make it happen, right? You have to channel the Fleshcraft on some specific mobs, and those mobs have generally been dying in pretty intense pulls, where I'm not sure there was really time to make that happen. But, I mean, if they had a Necrolord, I'm sure they'd be using it. I think it's also a case of just that there's not really anybody in the group that for whom, if you swap into Necrolord, the benefit is worth the loss.
Yeah.
Based on what they're currently playing, right? There are some players in the group that could play Necrolord, but if you swap your Unholy Death Knight, I think that would be a pretty common choice. Or you could swap potentially the Priest over to it, but I think Night Fae is really working out well here, especially given how important Fired Up is with all of those extra buffs he's got at the start of the dungeon. I think you want to just play to support him as much as possible. So, I mean, I think that's a really good decision, all the Covenants, and the entire way that Golden Guardian's composition is complementing their strategy here. They're making their way now. Domino Venom Blade, it's going to die for Golden Guardians before it's even pulled for PI Me. They have got a solid lead here. Wow, Domino Venom Blade going down underneath the 12-minute and 30-second mark. I mean, this has got to be one of the runs that they. I mean, if this isn't one of their best runs that they've been able to practice here, then they've got something really incredible going on here, because this is looking so good for Golden Guardians.
All right, but now we're getting to the most dangerous part, actually, of this dungeon because of Sanguine. Because this mini-boss here actually does not move at all. So if you spawn Bile Flesh in a Sanguine pool from one of the Devoted, then you have to just completely line of sight them up to be able to get him out of that Sanguine pool, or you have to wait until it despawns. So it looks like they're playing it really safe. They're not pulling all of the Devoted at the same time to basically just avoid Bile Flesh spawning in one of those Sanguine pools. It does always spawn on the furthest away Devoted mob that is active currently, so that's why you definitely want to make sure you don't have him port while one of them is low HP, otherwise you get that Sanguine, and that's really not something you want to see. But Golden Guardian's playing it perfectly, not having the mini-boss spawn in any of those pools, so no time lost at all. Well done.
Yeah, and they actually left the one Devoted mob right at the front of the room. That baited Iker to go ahead and teleport up over there. And so now they can go back over here, finish him off where there's not really any Sanguine. There's not going to be any problems as a result of that. And, there is a little bit of a Sanguine, but they're able to finish off right before the Sanguine healing would come out. They're able to then spawn the Prideful on the stairs up there, so they can use their Invis potions and get right onto the boss here. Really well thought out pathing through this room. And like you said, yeah, I mean, Sanguine is a really difficult affix to manage. Continue to put on a masterclass in this dungeon. They are getting started with the boss here, and this is just looking so good for them. Hard boss, though. This boss is not a free one by any stretch. There's a lot of damage coming out. They're going to be using stuff like the Anti-Magic Zone, like the Altar Time we just saw from Fired Up, to make sure that everybody isn't going to be dying to the heavy damage that's coming out, just the unavoidable damage. Also a lot of avoidable stuff that you have to avoid. Those tentacles are very one-shotty, and they need to be very carefully avoided, or else you're just going to die.
Yeah, one more thing that makes this boss a little bit easier is the double disease dispel that they actually have in their setup with the monk and the priest, so they can at least get rid of 2 of those stacking debuffs from the infectious rain that does a huge amount of damage to their group, and also those AoE defensive cooldowns that they have with the disc bubble, and of course the DKMZ as well. And now they're popping their Bloodlust for the second phase, it looks like. This boss, I think this boss is really difficult, as we talked about, but if you assign your offensive cooldowns properly and you only get 1 rain per phase, then it's getting a lot easier. So that's why we do see the Bloodlust being popped in the second phase, the Combustion was popped in the first phase, and then again in the third phase, and they're really assigned their offensive cooldowns to be able to not have one phase last too long.
Yeah, the second phase as well, it's a tricky one because you don't have all your opener. And then the last phase, Fired Up can move while scorching, and that's a really nice way to just manage the mechanics. You just have melee and a mage in the last phase, so you don't actually have too much problems where all the mechanics are going to force you to lose damage to movement. So the second phase, I think, is a really intelligent one to overload with some extra offensive cooldowns with the Bloodlust. But I mean, they're just, this thing is looking so good for them. This boss is now 15% and falling. Golden Guardians are going to get something like a 16-minute and 15-second Plaguefall. I mean, this is an incredible run for them. It's going to put them back tied to 1-1 in the series against PIME here, and we're going to a Game 3.
Absolutely. Golden Guardians putting on a show with a lightning-fast Plaguefall run here as they do tie up the series, and this is exactly what we've been looking for out of the team. Tells us the team, like, we know how capable that they are, and right there they're putting on the display where they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like their pulls were very decisive whenever they were starting to make their stuff. Like, they weren't really just like lingering around. Even the weird strategies with the Fungal Mancer and the Wonder Grow at the beginning, I feel like there's a lot of time that can be lost there because you're sitting there waiting for the mage to get the Fungal Mancer in position or whatnot. But Golden Guardians does a really good job of just like pulling and continuing to go the whole entire time. And that's reflected in the mages doing effectively 14k overall DPS. And it's like,
damn.
That's the numbers, Mason. What do they mean?
Exactly. And it's just like, obviously the mages
numbers.
are getting catered. Obviously the mages are getting catered to super hard. But whenever you're minimizing the downtime between the pulls too, I felt like that allowed Golden Guardians to kind of get an early lead. And then just, they were a little bit more consistent throughout the whole entire dungeon. I think that really showed itself through the whole entire run of Plaguefall.
Most definitely, and it was even most striking to me, Dratnos, when we started having some of the pulls after the first boss. You know, in live servers, we always look at, okay, we'll take care of the Plague Borers, we'll use them. But they were even dying because of I'm Fired Up doing so much damage before the Plague Borers could even detonate. That's how quick they killed everything.
Yeah, sometimes you can get in this spot in the dungeons where it's just like, okay, these are going to die to the Plague Borers, right? But if you're doing more damage than the Plague Borers, then why bother doing it that way, right? And Fired Up, when he has 7 stacks or whatever of that buff, is doing more damage than anything in the game, and you could see it reflected in the overall damage there. You could see it on the details meters at the time, and it's just incredible what he was able to pump out and the way that they were able to just cut through the first half of the dungeon.
On
I
top
didn't
of
even notice
that,
Oh, go for it.
I was gonna say, on top of that, Mage not target capped, Plague Borer target capped.
True.
There you go. Once again, these mages just win once again. I was kind of not used to seeing how large the mages were. I feel like in previous weeks they'd gotten the buff but weren't as tall. But let's start talking about some of the routing. All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, so immediately PI me and Golden Guardians, I felt like they had very similar pathing decisions and just very similar decisions for how they wanted to play the dungeon. Both groups start off, they have this Fungal Mancer, it's CC'd. It can cast Wonder Grow even while it's in like a paralysis or in prison. So you saw the Fungal Mancers being CC'd off to the side. Then, like, you take the Fungal Mancer through the dungeon, big mage, big boy mage here, the most damage too. And now they actually start to kill the Fungal Mancer before they make their way into the tentacle area. I think that making sure that you have enough mana to be able to spell steal the Wonder Grow over and over again is a really big deal. And Golden Guardians and Piami both do a really good job of making sure that they don't lose their buff. And now Golden Guardians doing a lot more standard pulls with doing like a bunch of these ambushers and defenders together in the third boss area, making sure that they don't let Sanguine end up healing up Ichor Bileflesh. Basically, he does his step every 66 and 33%, and they need to make sure that the Devoted adds, because he'll teleport to the active Devoted adds that they're in combat with. So they need to make sure that they are just dealing with those super well, make sure that they don't heal up that mini boss because that would cost them a lot of time. And it's just it was a lot of really technical solutions that they did in a really reasonable way. And I thought that Golden Guardians looked really good in that dungeon.
Most definitely. They take that victory, and it's going to be putting us into game number 3 here, Nagura, on Halls of Atonement with Tyrannical, Raging, and Necrotic. Ooh, that is nasty. You know, last time that we saw it, we did see a bear tank in
Yeah, I was
Halls
just
of
about
Atonement.
to say.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
I was just about to say maybe we see a Guardian Druid again because of that Thrash legendary. It just makes you almost invincible on those huge AoE pulls. And the Absorb Shield from the legendary also goes through Necrotic, basically. And that's why we saw Rentari play that Guardian Druid. No other team played Guardian Druid. It was really only PIME on Rentari that pulled it off. So we'll see if they're going to be playing it again or if they think it's not worth it. Because Guardian Druid, I mean, it can do well with those huge pulls, but if you can do the same thing with a Vengeance Demon Hunter, then it's probably just going to be better because of that magic damage increase that the Demon Hunter provides.
That's right. Well, we'll see what we have in store as the loser is going to be knocked down to the lower bracket. Winner's going to be moving on as PIME and Golden Guardians are looking to decide the series right now in Halls of Atonement.
Both these teams, no strangers to the lower bracket, but they would really, really rather stay in the upper bracket, at least for now, for as long as possible, and avoid the more difficult path to the end of the cup here. So this is going to be a really important game as we're getting underway. Both teams getting started here with those Vengeance Demon Hunters. And some big pulls going on. Ooh, actually, we do have a difference, though. For the second of 3 dungeons in this series, Igloo is on that Holy Paladin, and here comes the Ashen Hallow. Let's see what they're going to be able to do with this first massive pull on the left-hand side with this Paladin.
All right, that's just going to be some insane pulls that we're going to be seeing here by both of these teams as the shards are just starting to AoE here during the raging as well. So that was actually a huge amount of damage coming out of that shard because of the raging affix. None of these players, none of these classes can actually dispel off the raging effect, so they have to be careful. One more thing to note as well is the gargoyles that can be mind controlled with the Venthyr Covenant, they actually also benefit from raging. So if they put them into raging first, so if they get them to 30%, and then they use the Venthyr ability, which we've just seen PIME do, then they actually get extra damage from that Stoneborn. So that's why they just pulled it in earlier and then mind controlled it later. So really well done by PIME, making use of that extra damage.
Yeah, PIME able to get the exact same trash percentage done a little bit faster here, but it's sort of natural, right? You expect the Holy Paladin comp is going to gain some time on their big pull with the Ashen Hallow, and then the other team, the Discipline Priest team, is going to be likely to catch up over time, especially as they get to do any kind of Shadow Meld related time-saving stuff. That'll be where they'll start to gain back the advantage here. So I wouldn't say that PIME, I think that PIME was expected to have a faster first pull, and they did. And it's still tough to tell which team is actually ahead in the long run here, as PIME are going to be spawning their 40% pride. Golden Guardians working on that second trash pull. They have got some massive kiting to do here. Yoda really needs to watch out for the necrotic stacks. Beautiful Ring of Peace is going to be used here to really control all those mobs, and they're killing them all at exactly the same time. The pride is spawning here, but it's already sub 50% for PIME. They are making short work of this thing as well. There's just one more shard to take care of for both teams, and I expect we'll see another massive pull as they head on over to the right-hand side and grab just as much stuff as they possibly can onto that shard.
Yeah, it looks like they definitely do play the Stoneborn strategy differently. So PIME did play that that pride without Stoneborns, while Golden Guardians pulled one on top. And now PIME is gathering the Stoneborn on top of this pull, and it looks like they're gonna be, again, trying to get it into that raging range and then mind control it afterwards. So PIME making sure they're using the raging affix in their favor, while Golden Guardians does not care about the raging and just uses it without. So very interesting to see the difference in strategies here, as PIME is dropping really low because of that shard being in raging range on that last tick of the Thrash cast. And now there we go, we do see the Stoneborn being mind controlled by Igloo on that Paladin, and having that raging on it just means that this pride is going to die so fast.
Yeah, it's tough to say which is a better strategy, right? I think there's merit to both of them, because it is really nice to have the Stoneborn on pull, right, for the big AoE with its massive breath AoE damage, and it's nice to not have to cast in the middle of the pull later, but it's also really nice to have it do double damage from the Raging Affix, and you can see that PIME have really deployed that effectively to catch up here and kill this Pride nice and quick. But Golden Guardians not far behind, about 40% left on their Pride as it goes down for PIME, so they're doing a really good job of not losing any more time after that first pull, where PIME, I think, opened up their lead a little bit on the strength of that Ashen Hallow. Golden Guardians are going to need to find some place in the dungeon, though, where they're going to benefit from potentially the Shadow Melds or just from their composition in general if they want to catch up here, because Igloo has some more Ashen Hallows to deploy as this dungeon goes on. I promise you that first one wasn't the only one. In fact, we may be seeing one in the very near future here as we've just passed the 4-minute mark. Igloo's actually going to fire off the Divine Shield so he can just focus on casting his healing and damage abilities, not have to worry about dodging mechanics or dying to any random stuff here. Gets right in the middle of the pull, and we've seen Igloo actually fire off that Divine Shield, I would say very aggressively in the mists as well when he was on this Holy Paladin. He's done a really good job of just using the button and not saving it for when something's going wrong, but actually using it proactively. You can see they're able to just get some incredible work done now, as there is the Ashen Hallow. They're going to be melting Halkias with all of these cooldowns and with 2 Stoneborns. It looks like 2 Raging Stoneborns. Just massive damage coming out there. That is incredible, actually, what they've done with these Stoneborns.
Yeah, this boss was just melting. Now, you also see Igloo just... the damage from the Stoneborns does not actually get accounted to you in the damage meter here if you mind control them mid-combat. So that's why you don't see that extra damage. But trust me, those did a lot of damage for sure. So you can see Halkias just completely melting when those Stoneborns were active. The Houndmaster is raging as well. That's why we see a Hodge actually coming out of Igloo here. That Hammer of Justice to make sure none of those shots are going out. One last Synlight here coming out, unfortunately. So they have to dodge one more time before they finish up this boss. And it's getting kind of close. Looks like this boss was just on 1% HP for a long time, as they're also proccing that 80% pride.
Yeah, things got a little scary there. I think they would have really liked that boss to die about 5 seconds before it did. But with the anti-magic zone here, they should be able to recover. Igloo is looking fine on mana, as Holy Paladins often are. And they have to kill this pride, right? They can't skip it easily. Although it looks like Golden Guardians are killing their pride as well. So this isn't going to be a spot where the Invis Pots are going to be used or the Shadow Meld afterwards to skip the pride. Both teams are going to be killing the pride. So PI low on health, but they've managed to kill it, and they are on now to the next boss.
Yeah, that was actually really close. It looked like Dr. J didn't have his Cauterize ready, so incredibly close. Ice Block also on cooldown, just lots of defensives being used here. As they're running up to this next area, using their Shadow Melt, looks like Igloo, of course, not having the Shadow Melt available, so he needs to make sure he doesn't get in combat or uses the Invisibility Potion to get past this trash. As they're now fighting this next boss, they still have a little bit of that Pride buff left, so they're going to be having a little bit increased damage at the start, but of course you're going to be losing a little bit of uptime because of that skip that you have to do to this boss. So we'll see how fast they can deal with this one. They also don't have any Stoneborns to help them out here. We're going to see the next Stoneborns on the next boss, but this one, nothing, no extra damage from the Covenant. So everything has to be done by the players and mainly the mage with Kurisu's PI.
And so a little bit of an unfortunate lineup here of cooldowns has happened for PI. Their combustion wasn't available when the PI or when the power infusion and when the prideful buff were up. And right when those fell off, then the stun came out, and then eventually Dr. J was able to deploy a combustion. Whereas you can see on the side of Golden Guardians, Fired Up actually had everything align perfectly for him, and you can see reflected in the damage meters the difference between those two different sequences of events here. And that's a huge factor in why this boss is now almost even between these two teams, despite PI having gotten to it so far ahead of where Golden Guardians were. Golden Guardians here have just been able to deploy so much extra damage as a result of all the cooldowns multiplying together with each other rather than being used slightly offset from each other.
Yeah, this is going to be incredibly close here at the end of this dungeon. As you can see, Golden Guardians caught up quite a bit on boss percentage. Still slightly behind, but they can definitely make up for that one. Now, the setup between those teams is very different, right? So we're going to have to see who has more single target damage later on for those bosses. Of course, we do have the Paladin with that huge Ashen Hollow, but it's on a really long cooldown, a 4-minute cooldown. So that's something he can only use on one boss, probably, because it's probably not going to be 4 minutes between those two. So we'll see how they're going to be using that huge CD from Igloo on their side, as Golden Guardians is getting closer and closer to PI when you look at the boss's HP. So really well done by Golden Guardians having that much single target damage.
I think Igloo might be able to just sneak in 2 more Ashen Hallows, because right now
Maybe.
Ashen Hallows just come off cooldown, I think, based on counting from when it last happened. So I think that he'll be able to use it right at the start of the big pull that they're about to go with here, and then maybe during the last boss fight. It'll be really close, though, because this is a pretty short dungeon. Both teams are going to be making this massive pull work here, and it'll really just be a question of how quickly are they able to do this pull, and then how quickly are they able to get to the next boss. And then the last boss itself is a single target damage check. I think by the time we get there, it's likely whichever team pulls that boss first is going to be the one to win this series, if I had to guess. As we can see both teams now, wow, the massive pull coming out. Golden Guardians here deploying all of their damage. Both teams with those mages really ascending. All of the cooldowns really aligning well for both of them. Raging Mobs, oh no! Lip goes down for Golden Guardians, and this is going to be really bad. Yoda down as well. This is going to be a full team wipe for Golden Guardians, and this is a brutal, brutal sequence that it's now... Oh, this could easily cost them the match here. The thing is that if Piami can avoid having anything that magnitude go wrong for them, they're going to win this map from here as a result, because they were able to make that pull work without any deaths, whereas Golden Guardians with that full team wipe, it's just so costly. Look at the bottom right of our screen here. You can see Golden Guardians having to run back from the very start of the dungeon. This is just so catastrophic for them. It's going to be so much time lost as a result of this.
Yeah, that was just like a huge loss for them. Unfortunately, Lip going down there, and then they're just missing a little bit of damage on these Gargants. The Gargants were rage. They were enraged from the raging affix, and they were also buffed by the Houndmaster, it looked like, as well. So Yoda was just trying to kite, but everything just fell apart when Lip went down there, just missing a little bit of damage there to finish off that pull, unfortunately. As Piami, though, on their side, did this pull quite a lot cleaner. They had no mistakes whatsoever, as they're still on 0 deaths. Now they only have this mini boss left to do and the last boss. And you can see they also have Bloodlust available on their side. So we'll see how they're going to be dealing with this Pride as well, if they choose to skip it at all with those invisibility potions, or if they choose to play it. Of course, first of all, they have to finish off this mini boss, and they're going to be killing it in between those 2 Dark Communion casts. So they're just completely ignoring the neutral mobs, which is a viable strategy as long as you have enough single target damage to kill the boss before the cast comes out.
Yeah, it is actually going to be kind of close here, but they are going to be able to get it done. It was just about to start that cast, and they're kind of cheating away to the side here. Let's see if they do fire off those invis pots. Looks like no. It looks like they will be just fighting this Pride. This is, I think, always a safe thing to do, and it's a particularly good decision here, given how far ahead they are. You just don't want to introduce any more ways that things can go wrong, and just killing Prides is usually the safest way forward. Given the situation of this map, although I don't know if they yet know what has befallen Golden Guardians, as of course there is a little bit of a delay between when things happen and when teams find out about them. Looks like they might be thinking about pulling the last little bit of this Pride onto the boss here, and they are doing exactly that.
Ow.
And somewhere, so yeah, here comes the lust, here comes the combustion as well, and Dr. J is going to be pumping massive damage. It'll not only finish off that Pride, but it'll also carry over all of these cooldowns into the boss. Igloo is going to fire off the wings here. Doesn't quite have wings back, doesn't have Ashen Hallow back. Ashen Hallow, I think, is going to be ready around the 13-minute mark, so that's just going to be used whenever it comes up. He'll just fire it off, but he wants to make sure that this wings benefits from the increased damage of the Pride, and you can see they've got Lord Chamberlain, even on Tyrannical here, melting very quickly. They're going to be dodging the statues and carefully getting underneath the boss, mitigating these abilities. In terms of the actual damage this boss puts out, compared to most other end-of-dungeon bosses, it's one of the ones that does less damage, and it's, as long as you can dodge those statues, there's not actually too much that can go wrong here, and there's not really any trash that you're fighting with it that can further complicate things. So I think the Piami are in really good shape here to finish off this dungeon without too much else that can go wrong, as long as they can avoid those statues being tossed at them. Of course, those are very, very, very damaging.
Yeah, definitely. Golden Guardians just having 2 more full team wipes as they were trying to do a big pull again. I mean, that's the only thing they can really do at that moment. They know they lost so much time with that wipe. They were trying to just do that same pull again, but without having any of those cooldowns that they had the first time, which of course just makes it even more difficult than before. So just did not manage to get that pull done, as Piami is at 10% on Lord Chamberlain now. And as you said, I mean, Eagle actually getting hit by that last statue there, but thankfully didn't go down, as he's got enough, I guess, versatility and HP to survive that one. But Lord Chamberlain going down, and what a clean run by Piami. 13 minutes 31 as they win that first series against Golden Guardians.
That's right, Piami just putting on a great performance throughout, the series, taking that big victory here in Halls of Atonement. And a lot of times when we start getting to that end of the dungeon titles, it just becomes, performance time. Who's going to be able to lock down the mobs? Who's going to be able to pull it off? And unfortunately, Golden Guardians just wasn't able to make it happen.
I mean, it seemed weird to me. It was like Golden Guardians wiped at the last possible moment that they could have wiped. They did 8 pulls that were equally a lot harder than what they did and what they ended up wiping on at the very end. But the pull that they ended up wiping on, they let a Houndmaster Loyal Beast go off. There's no real room to kite in the third boss room, and then it's just all right, it's necrotic. There's a tank death, and once there's a tank death, your whole entire group's gonna wipe. There's not a lot you can do once it does start to spiral out of control. And you could even see we had the JB cam during it. As soon as the Loyal Beast goes off, he knows, he kind of knew that it was over too, and he was like, oh no, this is not it.
Yeah.